Let's talk about the biggest culture shock I experienced while visiting Japan. I've been to Japan 5 times and have spent almost 5 months there. Over that time, I've had all kinds of different experiences, but I'd say the biggest culture shock of all happened on the first night of my first trip when I stayed at a capsule hotel. The idea of spending the night at a capsule hotel seemed like the most Japanese thing I could do, so it was the first place I booked while planning our trip. But what I experienced that night showed me a side of Japan that I never knew existed. Let me tell you the story of what happened that night, and if you stick around, I'll share some new Japanese vocabulary spoken by a native speaker. With that, let's get started. Minasan, konnichiwa, nihongo dekimasu ka? My girlfriend and I had planned our first trip together to Japan, Nihon ni iku. During our planning, I had told her I was curious about capsule hotels and wanted to try one out. Upon hearing this, she made it very clear that she had no interest in staying in one. But she was fine with me going to one by myself for one night. And as she was headed to Japan a couple days earlier than me, and was going to be staying with a friend, she would just stay an extra night with that friend while I stayed at the capsule hotel by myself. The flight to Tokyo from Toronto is about 13 hours, and being a taller guy, sei ga takai, it is impossible to fall asleep. And so by the time I arrived in Japan, I was exhausted and in desperate need of a shower and some sleep. We met at the airport, then headed into the city so that we would be close to my hotel and the friend's mansion. My girlfriend asked me what I wanted to eat, and not knowing much else, ramen was my first choice. We found a cozy place and had something to eat. I remember eating spicy ramen that night, something that I've not seen very often during my travels in Japan. I also remember I was surprised by how cool it was that night, but I guess I should have known. It was winter break after all. Hotel ni chikazuita. We approached the hotel. It seemed pretty ordinary, though the lobby was quite small. Checking in was made easy with my girlfriend's assistance, though it would have been fine if it were just me doing it myself. After filling out the paperwork, we said our goodbyes and I headed inside with my special wristband that opened all the doors. Once inside, it was easy enough to find my pod. It was small, but not as small as I was expecting. Sure, I couldn't stand up easily or walk around, but there was plenty of room to sleep or even sit up if I wanted to. After dropping off my bag, I took a walk around the hotel to see what was going on. I'd read ahead of time about some of the amenities, and I took advantage of the free drinks and stack. Murio no nomimono to okashi. After getting a sense of what the place was all about, I tried to find the bathroom. And that was when I discovered for the first time the wonder of Japanese toilets. There were all sorts of buttons and features. I had no idea what they were for, what they did, or why anyone would want to use them, but I was still impressed, especially with the sound effects. Sugoi desu ne. For some context, at this point, I'd not yet used a washlet, but I was captivated in a sort of strange way. What was this novel technology, and why was it in this seemingly public bathroom? We couldn't have something like this back in Canada. After exploring the bathroom area, I was surprised to discover that there were no shower stalls, and that got me feeling a little worried. I just spent the last 20 hours traveling. I was covered in dried up sweat, I could smell my own armpits, I felt dirty, and I was in serious need of a shower. But there didn't seem to be one. Boku wa kitanai yo. At this point, I sent a message to my girlfriend. Where is the shower? What am I supposed to do? She replied with a smiley face and then said, there is an onsen. It's a shared shower. That is where you have to go. An onsen? What the heck is that? I wondered. I knew that Japanese people shared bath water, but I thought that was just something that they did at home with their family. I never realized that strangers also took baths together. To me, it was strange enough that you would use the same bath water with your family, but with strangers, that was next level. I sent another message. So you go in naked? What do you do then? She explained that I should take the yukata that the hotel gave me when I checked in to the change room, take off my clothes, fuku o nuide, go into the onsen, wash myself, and when I was done, I could come out and change into the yukata for the night. This whole idea made me uncomfortable. I never had to do something like this before, as this wasn't something we even did in Canada. If you go in a hot tub, you wear a bathing suit, and everyone has their own shower stall if you go to a place like a gym where you need to take a shower. So I went back to my pod and grabbed my yukata and some fresh underwear. But it took me a while to psych myself into the idea of taking a bath in the onsen. After a little too much time and hesitation, I headed to the change room, found a locker, and took off my clothes. Along with the yukata, they had also given me a small towel, which I then used to cover myself up as best as I could. I never played many organized sports or spent much time in a locker room, but this was certainly different. I had to take off my clothes and go take a shower with a whole bunch of strangers. But then, thinking about it now, it's probably easier to share a bathroom with a bunch of strangers you don't know. Shiranai hito. Stepping out of the change room and into the onsen was the hugest culture shock for me. To this day, nothing in Japan has surprised me as much as that first experience did. Once inside, I looked around to see what other people were doing. It was kind of difficult difficult because I didn't want to be the weirdo watching everyone wash themselves. But with a quick scan, I noted that people took seats in front of one of the mirrors and washed themselves before heading into the bath. I proceeded to find a spot. I made a point of not sitting near anyone else because I was still nervous and uncomfortable with the whole idea. But as I sat down, I noticed that everything I needed was there. Shampoo, conditioner, body wash, even face soap. So I proceeded to wash myself. Easy peasy. Karada o araimasu. While I was uneasy with the idea, it ended up being convenient. The water was nice and hot. I was close to the things I needed. There was a seat, which meant I didn't need to worry about slipping or anything, and I could take my time. I didn't need to worry about using up all the hot water. After washing myself and observing the people in the onsen, it became obvious that I was the only foreigner, gaikokujin. I headed into the bath. Wow, that water was hot. I like to take hot showers, and I've been in a hot tub, but this was different. It felt way hotter than what I had been used to. After spending only a few minutes in the bath, it felt like it was too hot for me, so I got out, rinsed myself off, and headed back into the change room where I put on my yukata and headed back into my pod to watch some TV and fall asleep. Though it was a little difficult to sleep with all the people snoring throughout the night, it wasn't nearly as shocking as going into that onsen. The next day when I woke up, I had asagohan, breakfast, and noticed that there were other foreigners at the hotel, but it didn't look like any of them had been able to make it to the onsen. It seemed that even with all my hesitation, I was one of the few foreigners who had been brave enough to head into the public bath. And now that I've been to Japan a few times and tried out a whole bunch of onsens, the idea of it isn't as scary to me anymore. In fact, it's something I look forward to, and even though I enjoy it, it's still a little too hot for me, so I can never handle it for as long as my wife or daughter. And an interesting note is that during the summer, while we were in Japan, it was atsui desu ne, way too hot all the time. But the onsen was still something that Japanese people did, and it ended up being a pleasant experience, which once again surprised me. If you've been to Japan and been in a public onsen, you may be used to this experience, but the first time is a serious culture shock that takes time to get used to. For me, on my first night in Japan, using an onsen was something that took a lot of force to get me to try out, and while it was worth it in the end, it wasn't something I'd ever expected to be doing. The funny thing is, there are probably lots of foreigners who travel to Japan and don't even know that onsens are a thing that you can do. But for me and my family, every time we head to Japan, we spend a couple nights at a ryokan and enjoy the onsens and the great food they usually serve. At the end of the day, after having a nice meal, it's subarashi to spend some time in the onsen before returning to your room, and if you are like me, you quickly fall asleep. So that is my story about the biggest culture shock I experienced while visiting Japan. And now, here is the new vocabulary introduced during this video.
日本に行く。背が高い。マンション。ホテルに近づいた。無料の飲み物とお菓子。すごいですね。僕は汚いよ。服を脱いで。知らない人。体を洗います。外国人。朝ごはん。暑いですね。素晴らしい。Yukata, onsen.
Thanks for watching, and if you liked the video, click that like button and subscribe. Until next time, mata ne!